The morning air was thin and crisp, the kind of mountain air that felt like it could clear out every trace of city life from her lungs. She stood at the trailhead, adjusting the straps of her pack, the weight pressing comfortably against her shoulders. It wasn't light, she hadn't skimped on supplies, but the heaviness gave her a sense of security. Every buckle, every clipped strap, every item inside the pack had been carefully chosen, tested, and placed with intention. This wasn't her first time in the wilderness, but it was the first time she would attempt a thru-hike solo. Months of planning, training, and mapping had brought her to this point, and despite the nervous flutter in her chest, she felt ready. The trail stretched out before her like a ribbon winding into the forest, tall pines standing on either side like watchful guardians. She paused to take it in. The sun was still low, sending golden shafts of light between the trees, the ground glittering with dew. She pulled out her camera, a small handheld she always carried, and recorded a quick clip. Her voice, soft but steady, broke the silence. Day 1. Colorado Trailhead. Let's see how far I can get. She gave a small, nervous smile, then tucked the camera back into its pouch. Her friends' faces flickered through her mind. The goodbyes had been quick, no tears, just laughter and teasing about her stubborn independence. They'd told her to check in as often as she could, even when the reception was spotty. She promised she would, though she knew that up in the mountains, connection to the outside world was a fragile thread at best. Still, she didn't feel alone. The mountains themselves seemed alive, humming with the quiet energy of rivers rushing far below, of branches swaying with hidden wind. She started walking, boots crunching against gravel and pine needles. Each step was deliberate, a rhythm that would eventually become second nature. The pack dug into her hips, but she welcomed the discomfort. It was a reminder she was out here, doing something real, something that few had the courage to attempt alone. She thought about the journal tucked into the side pocket of her bag. Tonight, at camp, she'd write everything down. She wanted to remember the details, the sound of woodpeckers echoing through the forest, the cool touch of the breeze across her cheeks, the way the trail seemed to stretch endlessly into a green and gold world. The climb grew steeper, and her breathing deepened, becoming a steady pull in and out. She wiped the sweat from her forehead, glancing back only once. Behind her, the trailhead was already hidden by the curve of the land. The parking lot, the small wooden sign, the faint voices of other hikers, gone. In their place was silence, punctuated only by the occasional call of a bird or the rustle of some unseen animal darting through underbrush. She wasn't afraid, she had prepared for this moment. But there was a thrill in the quiet, a reminder that from this point forward, every step was her responsibility alone. Hours slipped by. The trail shifted from soft forest floor to rocky switchbacks, winding higher and higher. When she reached a clearing, she paused again, setting down her pack and lifting her camera. The view stretched out below her, rolling hills blanketed in trees, snow-capped peaks in the distance, a patchwork of sunlight breaking through the clouds. She recorded a short clip, her voice breathless but filled with wonder. Worth every step, she whispered into the microphone. Then, after a pause, she added with a laugh, if I don't come back, at least I'll have this view forever. It was meant as a joke, but the words lingered in the stillness after she spoke them. She quickly shook off the thought, zipping the camera away and shouldering her pack again. She had many miles left before she could stop. The trail ahead looked daunting, weaving up into shadowy ridges that seemed to touch the sky. But that was why she was here, to test herself, to feel the pulse of the wilderness under her feet, to find something that couldn't be found in the ordinary routine of her old life. As she moved deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller, the light dimmer. The outside world slipped further away with each step. Soon, her figure was swallowed by the wilderness, the sound of her boots fading into the vast hush of the mountains. She didn't look back again. Somewhere in her mind, she knew she was leaving behind more than just the trailhead. She was stepping into a place that demanded everything from those who entered. And though her spirit was strong, though she carried hope and determination like a shield, the mountains had their own secrets, secrets she could never have imagined as she vanished into the green shadows of Colorado's wilderness. The first few days passed in quiet rhythm. She moved steadily along the trail, setting up her tent each night, cooking simple meals, and writing brief entries in her journal before falling asleep to the sounds of the wilderness. At first, she kept her promise to check in when she reached spots with reception, sending quick texts that read, "All good, camped by river, or rainy but fine. Her friends were reassured, imagining her out there in her element, pushing through miles with the same determination she had always shown in her life. But then the messages stopped. When she missed her next scheduled check-in, no one worried right away. Reception could be unreliable in the high country, and hikers often went days without a signal. But as the silence stretched into more than a week, concern began to grow. Her family made calls, then drove out to the trailhead, hoping to spot her car still parked where she had left it. The vehicle was there, untouched, sitting quietly under a layer of dust and pine needles. Her absence could no longer be explained away by bad reception or delays. Something was wrong. Search and rescue teams mobilized quickly. The Colorado wilderness was unforgiving, but early autumn meant the weather was still manageable for a large-scale search. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades chopping the silence as spotters scanned the endless canopy for a flash of color or movement. Dogs followed scent trails where they could, though the mountain air carried odors in unpredictable directions, scattering clues. Volunteers, friends, and strangers alike formed lines through the trees, combing ridges, valleys, and streams. They called her name until their voices cracked, listening for an answer that never came. Then came the first discovery: her tent, found half buried under a thin crust of snow in a sheltered grove. It looked as though she had left it in a hurry. The flap was unzipped, the sleeping bag half spilled onto the ground, and her cooking gear scattered in the dirt as if dropped mid-use. Inside, her journal lay open, the last entry unfinished, the ink blurred by moisture. The words hinted at fatigue, a mention of hearing noises outside her camp, but nothing that suggested panic. Searchers studied the scene carefully, but no clear answers emerged. Nearby, footprints were spotted in the soft earth, leading away from the tent and deeper into the trees. For a moment, there was hope. But the trail of prints stopped abruptly, as if erased by nature itself. Beyond that point, the ground was rocky, the forest thick. Whatever path she had taken was swallowed by the wilderness. Days turned into weeks. The weather shifted, storms rolled in, and the search grew more difficult. Helicopters could no longer fly safely in the worsening conditions, and snow began to blanket the higher elevations. Each passing day made the chances of survival slimmer, but still the search continued. Her family refused to give up, clinging to the idea that she might be injured but alive, waiting for rescue. Despite their efforts, the forest gave up nothing. No clothing, no backpack, no camera, no sign of struggle or shelter. It was as if she had stepped off the trail and vanished into thin air. Investigators considered every possibility. Had she fallen into a ravine that the searchers had missed? Had she encountered a wild animal? Or, more unsettling, had another person crossed her path in that vast and lonely terrain? The case soon grew cold. As winter settled heavily across the mountains, search teams were forced to retreat. The forest, once alive with voices and search dogs, grew quiet again. Her story slipped into local legend, another tale of the wilderness claiming someone who dared to walk its hidden paths alone. Newspapers ran headlines about the mystery hiker, and online forums filled with theories, some logical, some far-fetched. For her family, though, it was not a story or a mystery. It was an endless ache, an empty chair at the table, a life suspended in uncertainty. The trailhead where she had begun her journey remained, unchanged, the same wooden sign standing at the edge of the forest, the same path winding into the mountains. Hikers passed it often, some pausing to remember her name, others never knowing the story at all. The wilderness kept its silence, the trees standing as they always had, the wind whispering through the canyons. Whatever had happened to her remained hidden, tucked away in the folds of the Colorado wilderness, leaving only questions behind. Years slipped quietly past, and the memory of her disappearance faded from the front pages into whispers of campfire stories and unsolved mystery forums online. The trail she had once walked remained popular with hikers, but for those who remembered her name, there was always a shiver when passing the places where search teams had scoured the land. Some avoided that section entirely, uneasy with the weight of the unanswered. Her family never fully gave up hope, but as time wore on, hope shifted from the idea of finding her alive to the possibility of at least uncovering the truth. It was early summer when a pair of hikers veered off the main path, lured by the sound of a distant waterfall hidden in a rocky ravine. The descent was steep, the terrain jagged, as though the mountain itself had no intention of letting people pass easily. One of them slipped on a loose rock, and when he steadied himself, his eyes caught on something wedged between two boulders at the base of the slope. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than an old hiking boot, weathered and stiff, its leather cracked from years of exposure. But there was something strange about the way it sat, half hidden, as though carefully placed rather than dropped. Curiosity drew them closer. The boot was unmistakably aged, its laces frayed, its sole partly separated from the upper. Inside, there was a faint, unnatural glint that caught the light. The hiker reached in and felt something hard, wrapped in a thin layer of plastic that crinkled under his fingers. He pulled it out, a small SD card, remarkably intact despite its long concealment. The two exchanged uneasy looks. Whoever had owned that boot had gone to deliberate lengths to hide this object. They reported the find immediately. By the time authorities arrived, word had already spread through the nearby town. Search and rescue veterans, still haunted by the unsolved case, recognized the description of the boot. Its size and brand matched what she had been wearing when she vanished. The discovery reopened wounds that had never fully healed, and soon investigators were carefully cataloging the evidence, treating it as though it were a fragile relic from another time. The SD card was sent to a lab for analysis, where technicians worked carefully to recover its contents. Despite years of exposure, the plastic wrapping and the dry climate had preserved it well. Files flickered to life on the screen, images, video clips, fragments of her journey frozen in digital memory. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. For years, her story had ended with an unfinished journal entry in an abandoned campsite. Now, there was suddenly more, hidden in the soul of a boot, like a message smuggled out of the past. The implications stirred countless questions. Why had she hidden the card so carefully? Was she afraid someone might take it from her? Was she documenting something she didn't want destroyed? The placement inside the shoe seemed purposeful, a desperate attempt to ensure it would survive even if she did not. Investigators handled the device as though it contained the voice of a ghost, a fragile chance to hear from the woman who had walked into the wilderness and never returned. News of the discovery spread quickly, rekindling fascination with the case. Reporters descended on the small Colorado town once more, cameras flashing, headlines buzzing with phrases like, "Mystery revived," and "Hidden evidence found." Online communities lit up, dissecting every detail, speculating on what the files might reveal. Some believed it would show nothing more than scenic footage from her hike, while others whispered darker possibilities, that the card would expose the shadow of a pursuer, or capture her final terrified moments. For her family, the wait was agonizing. After years of silence, the possibility of seeing her face again, of hearing her voice, was both comforting and terrifying. It meant reopening old wounds, revisiting grief they had tried to carry quietly. But it also meant answers, and answers were what they had prayed for through long years of not knowing. When the lab finally confirmed the files were viewable, a quiet tension settled over everyone involved. Investigators gathered in a dimly lit room, their eyes fixed on the screen as the first images appeared. There she was, smiling, alive, the wilderness stretching behind her. Time collapsed in an instant. It was as if she had returned, reaching across the years with a digital hand, ready to tell her story in the fragments she had left behind. The boot, the hidden card, the deliberate concealment, every detail now seemed like part of a puzzle that, at last, someone might begin to piece together. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the computer as the first video loaded. Investigators leaned in, their expressions guarded, as though they were bracing themselves for something heavy. The screen flickered, and then her face appeared, slightly grainy but unmistakable. She was smiling, her cheeks flushed with exertion, the camera tilted at a casual angle as she walked along the trail. The mountains stretched behind her in all their vastness, sunlight catching the snow on distant peaks. Her voice came through clearly, filled with excitement and wonder. She spoke about the terrain, about how breathtaking the view was, about how she was proud of herself for finally taking the leap to do this hike alone. For a moment, the room softened. She wasn't a case file or a name in a news article. She was alive again, vibrant, full of determination. Clip after clip played, each capturing pieces of her journey. The footage showed rushing rivers, quiet meadows where wildflowers painted the ground in bursts of color, and the soft glow of her campfires at night. Sometimes she appeared on camera, propping it on a rock to film herself as she cooked or wrote in her journal. Her laughter was easy, her tone light. She seemed to be exactly where she wanted to be. But as the videos progressed, something shifted. Subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. In one clip, she paused mid-sentence and glanced over her shoulder, frowning at the trees behind her. She laughed it off quickly, calling herself jumpy, but her eyes lingered on the shadows longer than before. Another video, taken at dusk, caught her whispering instead of speaking in her usual bright tone. "I keep hearing something at night," she said softly, her face illuminated by the dim glow of her headlamp. "Could be nothing, but it doesn't sound like an animal. It's heavier, slower." She gave a half smile, but her voice wavered, betraying unease. The room of investigators grew tense as the final set of clips began to play. In one, she was inside her tent, the camera balanced awkwardly as though she had set it down in a rush. Her breathing filled the audio, fast, uneven. Outside the thin nylon walls, there was a faint crunch of movement, like footsteps circling. She whispered into the lens, "I think someone's out there." The words chilled everyone watching. The camera shifted suddenly, as if she had grabbed it to hold in her hands. The view shook with her movements. She unzipped the tent slightly, aiming the lens into the darkness. Nothing but black shapes of trees appeared, but the audio captured a low sound, something between a branch snapping and deliberate weight pressing on the earth. She pulled the zipper closed quickly, whispering, "Not an animal." The next clip seemed to follow immediately. Her face was pale, her hair messy as though she had been up all night. She spoke quickly, glancing around as if afraid of being overheard. "If anyone finds this, if this gets found, I need you to know I wasn't imagining it. There's someone out here." Her words broke, her lips trembling. She added something barely audible, "I think they're following me." The footage grew more fragmented after that, short bursts of recording, often shaky and rushed. One clip showed her stumbling through underbrush in daylight, breathing hard, camera jerking from the trees to the ground. Another caught the sound of running water and her voice gasping, "I don't know where I am anymore." Then came the last recording. She was sitting on a rock, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. The camera was close, her eyes locked on the lens as if trying to speak directly to whoever might see it. "If I don't make it out," she whispered, "check my things. I'm hiding the card." She looked down, fumbling with her boot. "If they find me, they can't have this. Please." A noise cut through the recording then, sharp, heavy, like something crashing through the brush. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. She grabbed the camera and turned it toward the sound, but the view blurred as she scrambled to her feet. Her breathing was frantic, her steps rapid. The video shook violently for several seconds before cutting to black. The investigators sat frozen as the final frame lingered on the screen. No one spoke. The silence in the room carried the weight of everything unsaid. She had left behind her own testimony, captured in fear and desperation, preserved only because of the desperate decision to hide the card in her boot. But the final moments gave no closure, only deeper questions. Who had been out there with her? Why had no trace been found beyond the tent and the scattered gear? And most haunting of all, what happened after the screen went dark? The release of the footage reignited the case like a fire long thought dead. News outlets replayed her final words over and over, splicing clips of her frightened whispers with images of the Colorado wilderness. Headlines asked the same haunting question: who, or what, was out there with her? Some viewers swore they heard a second set of footsteps faintly in the background of the recordings. Others claimed they could see a shadow moving between the trees, though investigators cautioned that such claims were likely born of imagination. But the unease was undeniable. The videos weren't just evidence of her hike, they were fragments of her final days, and they painted a story far darker than anyone had expected. Her family struggled with the new wave of attention. For years they had lived with the dull ache of absence, the uncertainty of not knowing, but now the wound was raw again. They gathered in their home, watching the recovered clips in silence. It was her voice they had missed most, the way she laughed at herself, the way she tried to stay calm even when fear bled through. The recordings gave them a piece of her back, but not the piece they needed most. They didn't reveal what happened after the camera cut off, and so the torment of not knowing continued. Investigators combed through the area once more, focusing on the ravine where the boot had been found. The terrain was brutal, marked by steep drops, dense brush, and narrow passages where a body could remain hidden for years. They found nothing new, no remains, no belongings beyond the boot and the card. If someone had followed her, they had left no trace. If she had stumbled or fallen, the wilderness had swallowed her whole. The forest was vast and merciless, and after years of snow and rain, even the sharpest eyes could miss what time had already buried. Speculation spread like wildfire. Some believed she had crossed paths with another hiker, someone who meant her harm and who had stalked her through the woods. Others suggested she might have become paranoid in her isolation, her fear amplified by exhaustion and hunger until she convinced herself she was being followed. More sensational theories emerged too, fueled by the eerie stillness of her final recordings. People whispered about hermits or hidden communities living deep in the mountains, about uncharted caves, even about something supernatural in the Colorado wilds. The lack of answers made every theory plausible. For the locals, the story became both a warning and a legend. New hikers on the trail sometimes paused at the old trailhead where she had first walked into the woods, staring into the dense pines with unease. Seasoned outdoorsmen reminded others to never hike alone, to respect the mountains that gave beauty but demanded caution. Campfire retellings of her story always lingered on the final recording, the crash in the brush, the camera shaking, her sudden gasp before the screen went dark. No one could tell it without lowering their voice, as if afraid the forest itself might be listening. For her family, closure remained elusive. They placed her journals, recovered tent, and now the SD card in a small wooden box, a private memorial to a life unfinished. They chose not to share every second of footage publicly, keeping the most personal clips for themselves. In quiet moments, they would play the earlier recordings, the ones where she was smiling at the horizon, laughing at her own clumsiness, full of hope and courage. That was the version of her they wanted to remember, not just the final fearful whispers captured in the dark. In the end, the card offered both answers and deeper mysteries. It proved she had not been alone in her final days, that something or someone had unsettled her enough to leave a desperate record hidden away. But it did not say who, or why, or what became of her after the camera cut to black. The forest had kept its secret, and perhaps always would. The trail remains open. Hikers still set out from the same wooden sign at the edge of the forest, their boots crunching over the gravel where she once stood. Most returned safely, their journeys nothing more than personal triumphs or memories of the mountain's beauty. But for some, the air feels heavier there, as if the land itself remembers. The story of the solo thru-hiker who vanished lingers in the wind, a reminder that in the wilderness, the line between adventure and disappearance is thin. Her voice, captured on that hidden card, echoes across time, a haunting testament to courage, to fear, and to the mysteries the Colorado mountains refuse to surrender.